Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu sekalian, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Saya mewakili IIHA mengucapkan selamat datang di acara sharing session kami. Kami juga mengucapkan banyak terima kasih atas kesediaan Bapak Ibu untuk bergabung di sesi ini meskipun short notice ya. Pemberitahuan baru kemarin, namun alhamdulillah yang memiliki waktu berkesempatan untuk bergabung ada lebih dari 100 orang. Mungkin saya ingin juga menggunakan kesempatan ini untuk memperkenalkan IIHA. IIHA ini adalah Indonesian Industrial Hygiene Association, yaitu asosiasi ahli higiena industri di Indonesia yang fokus pada kesehatan pekerja dengan visi kami adalah sebagai guardian of workers' health. Terima kasih telah bergabung dengan acara kami. Saya juga ingin mengucapkan banyak terima kasih atas kehadiran Dewan Pembina atau Board Advisor dari IIHA. Saya melihat ada Pak Syahrul, kemudian ada Ibu Elsye, ada Pak Royke, ada Pak Asduki, dan juga untuk semua member IIHA yang sudah join, kemudian rekan-rekan yang belum menjadi member IIHA, terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Kami juga mengucapkan selamat datang untuk Bapak Ibu dari Kementerian Perindustrian, kemudian ada Pak Budi Zubair juga dari RCI, Responsible Care Indonesia, kemudian Bapak Ibu dari Universitas Indonesia yang sudah bergabung, dan rekan-rekan semua yang tidak dapat saya sebutkan satu persatu. Baik, dengan mengucap bismillah, acara ini akan kita mulai.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Okay, Priyanka, yeah, I would like to welcome the speakers. We are very lucky today we have Mr. Susan Chatuverdi. He is process safety engineer at Reliance Industries. Welcome to our session. Mr. Srenik Ranpura from Global Leader Reco, and then Muhammad Nazrin bin Abdul Samad from GSK, Process Safety and Machinery Safety Engineer, Mr. Jitender Kumar, Director FET Solutions, Mr. Amis Kamat, Head of HSE, Bayer Crop Science. I would like to take the time to introduce our association, Indonesian Industrial Hygiene Association, which is established on January 2016. Now we have around 200 members in Indonesia, and our organization is a non-profit and non-government organization. My name is Mila. I am the current president of Indonesian Industrial Hygiene Association. And also I would like to introduce our board of advisory. We have Mr. Syahrul M. Nasri, we have Mrs. Elsye Asafira, we have also Mr. Royke and Mr. Asduki among the participants. Welcome Bapak Ibu, our board of advisory. So a special thanks actually to Priyanka for accepting our request to have this session and contacting the perfect speakers on behalf of our association. So I think we can start up our sharing session now, and I would like to hand over the session to Priyanka. Please welcome Priyanka.
Thank you, Mila, and thank you on behalf of Central Industrial Hygiene Association. We have our team members as well in the call. All our board members are in the call. We have Abhi Mishra, who is our secretary. We have Amit Rayani, who is our joint secretary. We have got Ghansham, who is our treasurer, Hitarth and Beju. And I think Indrajit has not joined in, but these are our board members from Central Industrial Hygiene Association. So on behalf of all of us, we would like to thank Indonesian Industrial Hygiene Association to contact us for this session. And our experienced and empowered panelists will be taking you through the session. Just to briefly lay out what's going to happen, we have a sharing session initiated by Mr. Shashank Chaturvedi from Reliance Industries, followed by Vizag incident investigation analysis, what we believe based on the information which we have by Shrenik. Then we will open up to our panelists to share in their perspective about the incident, followed by question answer sessions from your team, from the team who is on the call. And then Shashank would again share in some more technical information for everybody's knowledge. And then we'll close the session. Mela, that's the plan.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Okay. Thank you very much once again. And over to Shashank for the presentation.
Good morning all. I'll just share my presentation and we can then start off.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's there.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, good morning all. Today I'll be making a presentation on the recent styrene leak incident which happened in LG Chemicals in Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, India. But first things first, before I proceed, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to IIHA, CIHA, and especially to Priyanka and Amit Rayani from my organization for giving me this opportunity to interact with such an effervescent team of budding and experienced safety professionals and industrial hygienists. The entire intent and motto of making this presentation is to bring about an awareness of about what went wrong, and especially more emphasis on what needs to be done as a forward path to avoid recurrence of such incidents. Priyanka, if you could confirm whether the slides are changing.
Yes, they are changing.
Okay.
Shashank, go ahead.
So, standard disclaimer: the intent is intent of this presentation is educational purpose and knowledge sharing, and it does not replace any independent professional judgment. Whatever facts and opinions are expressed are my individual thoughts and not of sponsor and organizer. So, before I move to the incident, let us understand the history of the company. So, LG Chemicals was set up way back in 1961 as Hindustan Polymers. It changed hands twice, and the last owner was LG Chemicals, which is a South Korean company. The company was quite aggressive in its production targets, and it started off with some 45 tons per day capacity. I'm sorry, but there is some disturbance. If you could mute, someone's noise is coming. Okay. So the capacities originally were very low. In 2004, the capacity was somewhere around 45 tons per day. And in a period of 16 years, they ramped up the capacity to 7 times. So you can imagine what sort of risk appetite they had for handling reactive chemicals. And the styrene monomer was being imported by the unit, and before the incident, as part of the COVID management pandemic, a lockdown was imposed, and hence they were shut off. They had shut down their plant in March. So this is just sorry. So this is where this plant is located in India. This is the location of the plant where the leak occurred. Due to the current COVID pandemic, a lot of plants were facing manpower availability constraints, and also government had asked them to cut short of operations. LG Chemicals was one amongst such plants, and they had shut down their operations on 24th March. And after almost 45 days, on 4th or 3rd May, they got a clearance from government to restart or sort of prepare for restarting their operations. Just to give you a brief idea about what was the neighborhood around the plant. So on the north side of the plant, there was a vacant land. On the south side, there is a railway track. On the west side of the boundary, where most of the impact and damage has been recorded, there were residential plots. And on the east side of the plant, there is a river at 2-kilometer distance. This entire plant is spread in over an area of some 213 acres. and it has got multiple tanks with huge storage capacities for styrene monomer. So this is to give you an idea, the 5-kilometer impact area, which was identified by the municipal corporation and later on by the government agencies, was predominantly the impact footprint. This graph shown to you is basically a graph generated in a dispersion modeling software called FAST version 8.2. So as a process safety engineer, I was quite intrigued about what could have gone wrong and what was the actual impact, because styrene is basically not a very toxic chemical or a very hazardous chemical with toxicity point of view. Yes, fluidity hazards are there, but still there were some 12 fatalities which happened. So I was really concerned about whether such fatalities should have happened or whether it could have been avoided. So I did some modeling, and you see the 3 colored lines. So the blue colored line is basically the ERPG3 concentration, which is around 1000 ppm. So you can see that it is going up to more than 1.6 kilometers. The green line is LC50 line, which is 5500 ppm, and basically it means that there is a 50% probability, fatality probability, and it goes up to 500 meters. Sorry, it goes up to 500 meters. So we do have some fair idea about the damage extent. Following is the sequence of events on the fateful day. So on early hours of May 7, 2020 at about 3 a.m., the storage tank developed the leak of styrene vapors from top of tank and started spreading beyond the factory boundary towards the west side. So like I mentioned earlier, the wind was around 1.1 meters per second and was going from east to west. So the west side was seeing the spread of styrene vapors. So the incident is tragic, of course, no doubt about that. But had the tank temperature shot up beyond 154, the incident would have been much worse, because that's the boiling point of styrene. As per the interim report published by the government agencies, some 800 tons of styrene escaped into the incident. At the time of incident, they had an inventory of around 1800 something. The following are the noteworthy points. So what contributed to the incident aggravating to such an extent is it surfaced in the interim report that the working crew was not able to access the PPEs, especially the respiratory protective device of SCABA in a timely manner. The emergency response preparedness of the site was not up to the mark. This is very important. So already they were operating with a very skeletal operating crew, and even the crew which was present was not having the right mindset or the preparedness of emergency handling. So early stages of emergency, they could have controlled it, but they went into a state of panic, and because of a lot of reasons, they were not able to manage the emergency in a proper way. And it was also identified that the public siren system available in the plant could not be activated, since it was a manual siren. It required someone to go and press the button to start the siren. And that area had been rendered inaccessible because it was engulfed in the vapor cloud of styrene. So this in turn hampered the alerting people process, and thus the extent of impact increased. The root cause analysis, as per the report, shows that the problems probably began on April 2020. So, like I said, that they had shut off their operations and they were still handling and storing the inventory of styrene since then. And they had, I'll cover this point in subsequent slides, but there are certain things to be ensured when you are handling and storing styrene, which probably they overlooked, and this incident started probably in April 2020. And it is believed that the polymer concentration in the tank, which was idled at full capacity since March 25 post shutdown, it started showing the symptoms from April 2020. It's a very well-known fact amongst the people who handle styrene and other reactive chemicals that they exhibit runaway reactions because of its intrinsic properties, and it has an auto-accelerating nature even at adiabatic conditions. So these are the few snaps to give you an idea about what was the condition post-leak and how people were impacted. To give you a brief idea about properties of styrene, It's a colorless liquid with sweet smell. It is used extensively for production of polymers. The main ARPG values are 50 to 50 ppm and 1000 ppm. It is a flammable chemical. And the biggest problem with styrene is it
Sorry,
has.
Sushant. Sorry, Sushant. Sushant, I guess there's some request. Just be a bit slower.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I was, in the back of my mind, I was thinking there's a paucity of time, so I was a bit.
No, take your time. But yeah, just so that people can understand and see your slides properly.
Yeah. Sorry,
Thanks.
I'll keep that in mind. So styrene has a typical characteristic of polymerizing, and it also has a characteristic of polymerizing with its own monomer. So styrene basically is has a free radical mechanism. So imagine a surface full of styrene, and there are a lot of monomers of styrene inside it, and it is always emitting styrene. So what happens is the styrene comes out, the free radical comes out, and it is in a very excited state. So it requires to bond with someone to reduce its excitement. So if it finds another styrene monomer, it combines with it and still stays in excited state. However, if there is some inhibitor chemical present like tertiary butyl catechol, it will combine with TBC and then the chain reaction stops. So styrene is a reactive monomer, and the polymerization generally takes place by a free radical reaction, which is initiated either thermally or catalytically. This is most important. So for styrene reaction to start or for its onset, some energy is required, and it can be either a thermal energy or a catalytic energy, what we call as the activation energy. The polymer formation is initially very slow when the temperatures are low. So at ambient temperatures, maybe the reaction will not be very fast and the temperatures will not shoot up rapidly. But as the reaction proceeds with the evolution of heat, the temperatures start shooting up exponentially. And to avoid this, a globally accepted practice is to maintain the polymerization reaction is retarded or inhibited by phenolic inhibitors. And the most widely used and most commonly used inhibitor is tertiary butyl catechol. The polymerization reaction is exothermic, as mentioned by me earlier, and it can become violent beyond certain temperature. If the heat is not removed in a very in a timely way, the heat accumulation can go to an extent where polymerization can be self-sustaining. So it may not require any further temperature excursion, and it can become self-sustaining, and it may not require any other driving force for it to continue. And in the process, it may also release a large quantity of heat together with volumetric expansion, which was what was evident in this incident. So what are the critical conditions to make sure that this doesn't happen? So there are basically three important criteria. First critical condition is temperature. So styrene monomer storage tank should always be maintained at a temperature below 20 degrees centigrade, since that is the onset temperature, and once temperatures are not maintained below 20 degrees, the reactions can start. TBC dosing. So tertiary butyl catechol, the inhibitor that is being used for styrene reaction inhibition, its level has to be maintained at around 10 to 15 ppm, and this is most important. So TBC level in the tank should be maintained 10 to 15 ppm, and it has to be monitored regularly, because if you start losing the TBC concentration, or if due to some reason the TBC concentrations are depleting, there are chances that the TBC, the polymerization reaction can start. And for most important, another part is TBC cannot combine with styrene if there is no oxygen. So a typical characteristic of flammable flammable compound tank like styrene is it will have nitrogen padding. So if there is a nitrogen padding, the problem is that the TBC will not be able to combine with styrene monomer, since it requires oxygen as well for combining with styrene. So what industry people do is they also maintain an oxygen, or they sort of inject oxygen in the environment of styrene, where the oxygen concentration should be minimum to 15 ppm of dissolved oxygen in liquid phase. And this is the precursor for TBC to be effective and available for inhibiting the styrene polymerization reaction. So this is the general flow of safeguards. This is the general chronology of safeguards. So you first have control and monitoring system, then preventive safeguards, mitigation safeguards. Finally, you have your emergency response systems for plant and for outside. So for control systems, in this case, the tank should have a chilling mechanism or a refrigeration mechanism where temperatures are maintained below 15 degree, and also it should have an insulation for cold systems. The the oxygen concentration inside the tank should be monitored and maintained in the required concentration, which, as I mentioned earlier, should be minimum 15 ppm for the styrene to combine with TBC. The TBC level should also be monitored because TBC along with oxygen should be available in minimum 15 ppm concentration. So TBC monitoring is also critical. In case you are not able to monitor or maintain these concentrations, the first signal should be the temperature rise, and that should be wired to the panel operator. So there should be a monitoring of tank temperature at 3 locations: the top of the tank, middle of the tank, and bottom of the tank. And once you have tank temperature rise of bulk mass of the styrene inside the tank, there should be a mechanism which alerts the operator that tank temperatures are rising now. There should be another pressure alarm. At times, instruments can go haywire. So in case your temperature alarm doesn't show the excursion, you should also have a pressure alarm to alert the operator. The emergency relief devices should be there. Here in this case, there were rupture discs, there were relief valves. So all tanks should have some emergency relief devices to take care of the overpressure. And this is very important because in case of reactive chemicals, the relief devices have to be sized using specific studies. So there is a study called vent size packaging, which is used for understanding what should be the relief device size. So those are the very specialized studies which needs to be done when you are engineering the emergency relief devices for chemicals like styrene. And finally, you need to have very sturdy and very up-to-date emergency response plans, because in any case, everything can go wrong, and finally you have to have yourself prepared for the emergency. This is there was an interview which was telecast on local channel in Andhra Pradesh. So basically, this plant is located in Andhra, and Mr. Mohan Rao, who is the director of operations and currently under legal investigations, he was interviewed by local TV channels, and it was in local language. So I got it translated with the help of my friend. So what he mentioned prima facie was, according to him, the reason for styrene leak was a runaway reaction, and this caused the overpressure in the tank, blowing the roof. However, later on it was understood that the roof had not blown off. Yes, there has been some leak in the tank roof, but there was no blowing off the roof and eventual release of the gas. So from the above statement, it can be inferred that the leak, the temperature shot up beyond their control range, and they were not able to stop the leak as the polymer had a runaway reaction, and it cannot be controlled. In fact, the interim report clearly states that they had a practice of switching off the refrigeration system every night, because they believed the ambient temperatures were low enough to keep the styrene monomer below the required temperature of 20 degree. And also they were having depleted stocks of TBC. So what they thought was, because they already had those certain amount of TBC in the tank, maybe they won't be requiring TBC for a long period of time. And also it is believed that they might not have monitored the levels properly. So the two contributing factors was they didn't have TBC stocks, and they went with their gut feeling that they are maintaining the TBC stocks in the required concentration, and also that the most critical part of refrigeration system or the chilling system for the tank were made dysfunctional intentionally during the nights with the belief that the ambient temperatures can provide the required cooling. So what are the probable contributing factors? These are based on the reports. So the temperature control might not have worked. Improper monitoring of TBC levels. These are basically my inferences from what I read on the internet. So maybe they were not maintaining the temperature control properly, which has come out in the report. Maybe they were not monitoring the TBC level. So since they didn't have TBC quantities, the monitoring became very critical for the existing concentration. So maybe they were not monitoring properly. Also, the oxygen levels were not being watched properly. Since they had shut off the plant for almost 45 days and they were having very less staff to operate with, they should have conducted an effective pre-startup safety review so that it could have helped them in making sure and checking whether they have the right systems and right people to kickstart the plant back again. And in general, it was observed that the people who were there, they probably were not having the required level of awareness about the hazards of styrene. What are the reactivity mechanisms? What are the runaway characteristics? And how to handle the emergency and be prepared for the emergency. So they had, in total, it could be said that the awareness about the hazards of styrene was not at the required level. And finally, as is evident from the report and from the extent of damage, the emergency response was not effective. So emergency response and control planning should be proactive, and you should be prepared with all the equipments and devices beforehand. And you should not, sort of run here and there in case of emergency. You should know exactly what needs to be done by whom and up to what extent. So with that, I would like to hand over to Mr. Shrenik for his presentation. So Shrenik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sushant. If you can unshare your screen.
Yeah, I've stopped sharing.
Thank you very much. Excellent session, Sushant. Really appreciate the way you talk about few of the background about the company, what led to an incident, and then what were some of the things that were missing. So really very nice information was shared by you. Really appreciate. If you can mute your line, will help me to. Okay. Perfect. So hello everyone. My name is Shrenik, and I'm going to take you through few of the methods that we have used in terms of identifying what went wrong by using the systemic method, and then few of the control measures from those aspects, how we have derived from. So I'm going to take you through two methods and some of the actions that has come out from those methods. So as Sushant also shared, a few of the preliminary investigation says that the particular incident was result of improper maintenance of the storage unit, including the temperature controller unit that were available over there. And then there were also few improper storage practices in terms of having the right dosages when you store a particular styrene monomer. And a couple of things led related to an operational error and which resulted into the particular incident. Now, I'm trying to be as slow as possible while speaking, but if you feel that still there is a few things that needs to be improved, let me know and I'll be happy to do that. Okay, so what we did is during identifying and using this method is we tried to do identification basically on two factors. The one is contributing factor, which means that factor resulted into the incident immediately, but then there are some causal factor which prompted that particular employee to do that. And 90% of an incident gets finished with the contributing factor and blaming the people. Now, most of the incident analysis that I have done when I go to the site after incident, site will say me that employee is fired or he is suspended for 1 week. Now, those are the people to whom we need to take an interview. And if they are not available, then we will not be able to do a right investigation at that point in time. So in the Vizag incident, probably the contributing factor might be of employee did not turn on the temperature controller unit. But then what are some of the reasons that led an employee not to turn on that temperature controller unit? Most of the investigation will finish at employee did not turn on the controller unit. But then what we have done in this incident analysis by using method is identifying few of the reasons which led an employee not to do and led to an employee not to turn on that temperature controller unit. So what we have done is we have used the 5 why analysis and causal and effect analysis. We used kind of asking questions based on information that is available by keep asking questions, and then a team of CIHA sat together to identify what were some of the root causes that we could identify related to the causal factor analysis. So the main incident was a gas release. Now, we tried to identify why that particular gas release happened. So one of the things that CIHA team came up was there might be a probability that valve got break. Now, based on the valve breaking mechanism, we tried to identify how the valve will break. So there can be a pressure buildup, or the particular valve was very old and not maintained. Now, why there was a pressure buildup? Because there was a temperature increase, or there was a pressure relief valve got failed. So we tried to deep down and identify further that why there was a temperature increase. So there was a temperature increase because the temperature controller failed, because the employee did not turn on the temperature control unit, because because we failed to turn on the temperature unit during the startup. So these were the few of the things which would have led to a temperature increase. And also the chemical reaction inside, as Sushant shared, would also have contributed into the particular temperature increase and then the pressure buildup. Now, we tried to find out now why the temperature control unit failed. So we dig few of the informations that temperature log we checked that was okay. Probably the particular temperature controller was calibrated, so lab tests and the calibration records were available. So which says that these are not the reason which resulted into the temperature control failure. Now then we move to the next cause, whether the temperature control unit turned off. So when we found out the informations that procedures for particular operating this storage tank was not available. So procedure doesn't specify that the temperature unit needs to be turned on when we store any particular chemical. Now, the employee who is using this particular storage tank, he was not aware about that he needs to turn on the temperature unit controller, and there is no pre-startup process safety management done for this particular activity. The third cause were failed to turn on the temperature unit during the startup because they were coming out after probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks of lockdown, and they were in a hurry to start their production. So that they did not give sufficient time for their particular activity to start that operation safely. And because of that hurry, they did not complete the pre-startup safety review checklist. So these were the reasons that we believe would have happened with the temperature increase. And then when the pressure relief valve failed, probably there was no inspections, or that pressure relief valve would have been closed. And that is why that pressure buildup happened. And then because of it, the valve got broke. So that was about the 5 why analysis that we used. May I request you to turn on your mic on mute, please, so everybody will not get a disturbance. Thank you. The Another incident analysis method that we use was event and causal factor analysis, where we identified a particular incident of gas release. Now, what were some of the events that happened before this incident happened? So they were filling up the storage tank, their level indicator was being checked. So all those events were there. But for all those events, what were the conditions? When you fill up a particular tank, you should have the temperature control unit on. You should have checked the pressure relief valve. Now, those conditions, if you do not meet, then particular incident, particular conditions will be identified as causal or contributing factor. And what we did is Sushant showed us all the incident before the gas release, but now we have used this particular causal and factor analysis to identify how was the response once the gas release happened, and what are some of the things or the conditions that were missing in those response. So we have covered both. First is before the incident, what are the cause and things happen by 5i analysis. And now with this causal and factor analysis, we are going to demonstrate you what are some of the conditions that did not meet after the gas release happened. So there were 11 people died and around thousands people were affected. Now at 4 a.m. they notified to the authority, and around the same time they had evacuation started. So when they started an evacuations, there were some of the conditions that has to be met, which means those control measures has to be there at that particular time to ensure that evacuation is proper, and then the casualty will not increase more if evacuation has been proper. So emergency equipments, when they started to do that, evacuation did not available. Like self-contained breathing apparatus and all. The people around industry and inside of the industries are not aware that if gas release happens, what are some of the control measures that we need to do, or how do we keep ourselves safe from those particular incidents. Now, emergency vehicles were not available. There was a huge evacuation required and number of vehicles were very short. So those response time also led into the more casualty in nearby premises. Now, they started spraying water in the air, and then the offsite plan was not available and it was not practiced properly. Now, the particular PTBC chemicals they sent from another state. So if their emergency response was proper, they should have kept probably that chemical at the site to ensure that in case some emergency happens, we should have used that particular chemical to reduce the effectiveness of styrene gas release. Now, if all these things would have been in place, probably the severity or this much of casualty would have not happened. Now, around 5 a.m., they started to admit people in the hospital. Now, what happened at the hospital? Now, staff was not aware about what are some of the treatments that we need to give or the antidote we need to give to the affected people. So that was not in place. There were not enough beds available for the number of casualty that happened. There were thousand people were affected and they did not have that much of capacity at the hospital. And then they wanted to give them an oxygen at that particular incident, but they did not have enough number of oxygen bottles at that particular location. And around 11 a.m., they brought this situation under control. So what I mean to say by all these things were there are 9 conditions that did not meet once the gas release happened. So whatever we have done in terms of recommending a control, we have looked at these 9 conditions post-incident, and then all the 5i analysis causal factor that we have identified. And if this would have been met, probably the particular thousands people got affected would have been brought down below 500 or even the casualty. So what we have done is while identifying the particular incident control measures, we have looked at the work environment and equipment. We looked at the procedure that was followed by the company, the people interaction during that time, people and procedure interactions, and the environmental interface. So these were the conditions and the factors that we looked while identifying the particular corrective actions for this Vizag incident. So what we did is for all those 9 causal factor analysis that we found, and also from the 5I analysis, we developed a kind of fishbone for each of the cause factors. So if we have 9 plus 6, total 15 cause factor. So we developed fishbone for each of those causal factor and tried to put it in a particular fishbone analysis. So I'm going to display only the one causal factor for your purpose on how we have identified the particular corrective actions. And then later stage, I will summarize a few of the corrective actions. So training to the people who are working with the particular equipment was conducted 5 years before. It was not conducted recently. Now, training program was not updated using the particular methods that is required for people to know. If we talk about the supervision, the supervisors never perform this particular task, or he has never seen this particular task. So probably he was not having an idea on how to restart this particular operations and what are some of the storage practices. Now, the procedures, what we believe was unclear for people to follow, and they were not written step by step. So if it would have been written step by step, probably this would have been happen, and employee who are working with that would have at least followed those procedures to implement. And then when we looked at the equipment, the temperature control unit is not interlocked. So if temperature is increased above 20 degrees Celsius, it may have an interlock. So you will not have a storage. You have not any addition of styrene inside of the tank. And also you will have a cooling system getting started. So those kind of interlocks were not in place when equipment was there. And this is my last slide on some of the corrective actions that we believe can help in terms of not repeating such incident in future. So temperature control unit was turned off. So if there is an auto cutoff temperature controller, then this would have been not happened. Communication, the process safety management, temperature rise alarm. If there is a temperature rise, there will be an alarm. Temperature interlock with pressure relief valve. So if temperature goes above 20 degrees Celsius, the particular pressure relief valve will get open automatically. The another factors on which we have identified the control measure is fail to turn on the temperature control unit. So develop and conduct a proper pre-startup safety review, and then those verification needs to be done by the plant director at the particular facility. So with this, I will say this is our analysis of CIHA team using both 5I analysis and then fishbone to derive to a corrective actions. And we tried to cover both pre-incident, what could have led to this particular gas release. And then after the gas release happened, how was the response and where we can improve further to avoid the number of casualty and keep it at less level. So with this, I will say thank you very much, IIHA and CIHA President Priyanka for organizing this wonderful session. I'll be here and I'll be happy to give any of the answer. You can type it in a chat window also, and I will reply to your messages in the chat window. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shrenik. Sorry for the echo at my end. Now we have 3 panelists as well. I would request Nazareen to just share in his views. We don't have a presentation, but Nazareen, over to you. If you could share in your views on the incident. We'll follow that with Amish and with Jitendra, and then we would open it for question and answers.
Right. Thanks, Priyanka. Thanks. So thanks everyone for being able to join in this session. I was invited by Priyanka, I think last week, to give my views on some of the insights based on what has happened at the Vizag plant. So some of the views and opinions that I'm expressing now or here are purely based on my professional experience and knowledge, so does not necessarily represents GSK's views on this matter. Yeah. So I mean, in my opinion, in the terms of the definition of process safety that we have in GSK, the gas leak incident, the recent Vizag incident, we consider that as a societal catastrophe because it impacts the community surrounding it, and it's almost as well, not as bad as the Bhopal disaster is 1984, but it in fact does have a number of fatalities um, surrounding in the villages around the area. After reading through a lot of the information that is available on internet and based on the presentation from the members just now, I think that my top three reflection based on these incidents, one of them is in terms of the change control process. So change control process is important, or rather one of the basic tenet of a process safety. So irrespective of whether we are doing changes to the plant or running the plant or shutting down the plant. So I think whenever, for example, this particular period where we had the COVID situation that around the world resulted in a lot of companies having to shut down, unplanned shutdown, or even prolonged shutdown. I think if we could have anticipated the unscheduled shutdown or even the prolonged storage of materials which is left in the tanks at the LG Chemicals, that probably could be taken into account all the possible scenarios or consequences and effect. A lot of the, maybe if we were to talk about the change control process, usually it talks about quality of the product, but I think we must not also forget that we need to focus on the safety aspect of our materials that are being stored in such a prolonged duration of I think about 45 days. And upon startup, some of the panel members have presented regarding the PSSR, the pre-startup safety review, that also could have been be ensured as part of the change control process, which again I don't have any insight in terms of what are the processes available at the LG Chemicals. Okay. My second reflection, in terms of the process safety risk assessment, again, is one of the basic principle of the process safety management. So the process safety risk assessment that I can think of is definitely the HAZOP, where could have been taken into account all the abnormal situation. For example, during the startup or during the shutdown, or even during storage, or even the maintenance of the plant, where in normal HAZOP will usually we consider the normal the standards, the steady state operation of a plant, but in this case it's kind of abnormal because it's been stored for a period of time. Other more quantitative assessment, for example QRA, quantitative risk analysis, there was a model presented earlier using a dispersion model based on the wind direction, wind speed. That could be also could have been, well before the plant was operating or was set up there. Could have been, a part of the assessment to ensure that we do not injure or have a severe consequences of any incident to the normal to the surrounding community, not just the community but also to the environment, whether the contamination of a wastewater or even animals, for example. The other point that what I'm thinking about the process safety risk assessment is on the concept of safe hold points. Safe hold points, whether does the duration and the condition is so-called safe enough. Usually it will definitely require more experimental data or stretch experimental data for as long as maybe 45 days. In pharmaceutical industry, we have the same concept of stability data of our product that we need to stretch it over 1 year, 2 years to ensure that the product doesn't deteriorate based on the certain conditions that we anticipate. So kind of similarly again for storage of materials, again this same concept could have been also been be adopted to ensure that we holding it safely, and of course if we have more data, then that can be incorporated into the SDS of these particular materials. My third point on reflection is on the emergency response and the crisis management. I know the previous members also have also mentioned regarding the inadequate rather emergency response by the operators, by the staff when they encountered this. So in any chemical plants, emergency response plan needs a robust one, needs to be exercised in a regular manner based on the scenario. For example, if we have identified the scenario of a gas leak could be as one of the potential consequences, then the plan could have been exercised more regularly, I would say. But that it was up to discretion of the company to to do how frequent. The other aspect of emergency response and even a crisis management, I'm thinking of the corporate memory. Again, corporate big companies would have encounter a couple of process safety incidents. We just name it: Union Carbide, ExxonMobil, Shell, whoever the big companies are. So usually this corporate memory could just reside within the company, but that doesn't, I think, stop us from trying to gain understanding or gain learnings, even if especially when it happens in a particular country. There's even more important for the local authorities or the professionals working that in that particular country to gain that learnings and keep emphasizing on those incidents, and for example the company, the corporate from LG Chemical, it could be ingrained into their process of ensuring that the corporate memory does not just last for a couple of years, but it has to last the whole life of the company, of the corporate. So to ensure that the people learn from the past learnings and don't repeat that in the future. That is what I have my insight, my top 3 reflection regarding the incident at the Vizag there, Priyanka. Couldn't hear you, Priyanka. I think are you on
You're on mute.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Nazreen. Great insights. Just in the benefit of time, I'll go down to the next panelist, Amish. Over to you.
Yeah.
Because I need to give some time for question answers as well.
Yeah. I know. I get the hint. And thanks everyone for being here. I see a good participation here, and thanks all the speakers. It was a wonderful insight. As the session is named lessons learned, I would name it lessons forgotten, because what I see is there is nothing that is new that is coming up. Learning about such similar incidents, there is a classic example of 1984, talking about the particular chemical styrene. Recent case is 2019, which happened in Korea itself, where there was a huge fire explosion in the shipyard itself. A ship was blasted. So there are n number of things. I like the very technical details given by Shrenik and Sushant, and I echo the points Nazreen has made with respect to the management systems. So these are the kind of lessons what we have forgotten. One is the management of change, which understanding, and I see that a lot of there are some comments in the chat box as well. Is there a wake up? Is this a wake up call? I love that comment. Actually, it is a wake up call for those who are going to start their factories now. So this is a best time, and this is the best time for having this session and having almost 150 people on board who are HSE experts. So time for look back into your factory again and think about some similar hazards that could be there in your factory waiting for the trigger point. So maybe this is a good point. Yes, it is definitely a wake up call. Look at your operations. Looking at your operations, when you go back, are you going to anticipate something like this? So yes, management of change is very important. Looking at it, emergency management plan. Yes, I have learned from the presentation today that there were a lot of lapses or kind of failures in the management plan. I could not, the employees could not access the SCBA. They could not go to the control room. These are some of the aspects which are very important. Generally, what we see is the site HSEs, they prepare this emergency management plan. They are bulky documents, but ultimately fail to perform. So idea is, as Nazreen again touched upon, these should be based on a real emergency scenario. They should be practiced. So this is something that is a lesson that we have forgotten to do that, and probably the victim company has forgotten to do that. The third most important point is again the hazard identification and risk assessment. Uh, as one of the emergency actions that was done after the incident, as I read through the documents and the published report, was the company on emergency, they purchased a stabilizer from a local company to put in the existing stock of styrene, the remaining stock of the styrene, and the styrene stock was removed from the site and exported back to the parent country. That is what something that was done by the company and the government. That indicates that the material had already started into auto polymerization. You must be aware that the styrene goes into auto polymerization, and that is the main reason of concern. So these are the things, identifying this hazard and putting this hazard as a on the priority, listing it as a priority. Not the TCD chemical shouldn't have been in, it shouldn't have been conserved. Keeping a low stock itself is a failure. So these are some of the points I think that are the lessons that we have forgotten. We by otherwise we all are HSE experts, HSE people in the at the site, and we are well aware of the site. But what we fail is to do the same process day in day out. We sometimes become very immune to the same routine procedure, giving a permit, making a management of change, or doing a hazard identification or risk assessment. We should not at any point we should not become lax in these management system, and this is very important. I think Priyanka will open it for the Q&A. since it's
Yep.
in half an hour. Yeah.
Thanks, Amish. We've got one more panelist, Jitendra. Jitendra, if you would also like to summarize, I guess Nazreen and Amish have covered most, but if you want to just share in your perspective in 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Priyanka. And in fact, I'll try not to repeat anything that is covered already.
Yeah.
Just to brief, I'm working for a company called FET, which is basically FET Solutions, which is fire explosions and toxic solutions. So this is exactly where we work on the process safety side. And we have EJJV as our Indonesian partner. So what I can say is Selamat Datang Indonesia and Good Morning India. Now, basically, what we have talked about is that almost everybody is talking about investigation leading to human error, procedural lapses, not enough PSSR, and emergency response as probably the causal factor that led to these incidents. Now, these might be valid reasons or valid causes that are coming out from all the reports. But the only question I have is that should we allow these procedural lapses or human errors to lead to 11 fatalities? And that's exactly where I want to really focus a bit more on the process safety side. So we talked about hazard identification. None of the reports really talks about the chemical reaction hazard. None of the reports really talks about what kind of temperatures or pressures we are really talking about when we have a chemical reaction or a polymerization starting. This was an exothermic reaction. Started slow, but at the end of it, it really went off beyond the design limits. Now, so for that matter, what we should have done is proper testing, DSC and the calorimetry testing, which would have told us that what kind of temperatures or pressures we are looking at. And once we know that what pressures we can see, we can plan the design accordingly. So if we can increase the design pressure of the equipment itself beyond the maximum possible pressure, we will not lose the equipment, we will not have the loss of containment, we will not have the fatalities. So that's one of the areas that probably was completely missed out. Then talking about temperature alarms, somebody talked about temperature and pressure interlocks. So as soon as we have a temperature reaching a certain point, if we can start chilling or the cooling part, if it can control the temperature and thereby pressure, probably we are still able to safeguard the equipment. Or even if it is not really able to do that, let's dump the inhibitor. Let's kill the reaction itself inside the equipment. So that's again which has not been really picked up yet. So that's one more thing I want to talk about. So the interlocks, and that can be inhibitor dumping. And yes, we have talked about management of change. The site expanded 7 times in 16 years. That was something which was really missed out. The QRA was not carried out. The HAZOP was not done. So hazard identification was there. And the issues related to emergency response have already been picked up. So I really don't want to further talk about that. And probably because of the time constraints, I think I'll stop here and we can take up the question answers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jitendra. So yes, I guess all of us did share, and I guess the whole team on the call definitely feels that, people, we have to give our time, awareness, knowledge, information to people because they are the biggest resources. Systems needs to be worked on, whether it is preventive, pre-startup, changeovers, change management, that needs to be taken care of, and infrastructure is also really important, not just in terms of the infrastructure of the plant, but as well as infrastructure for the emergency preparedness, infrastructure for the escape scenarios, infrastructure for the medical staff around. If there is a medical hospital around an industrial area, at least they should know what kind of chemicals are available in the vicinity and what should be the kind of antidotes which we should have. And these are some ways in which community practices are done by many industries to make the hospitals aware of the industrial scenario and what kind of prevention can be done. So I'll not take much time. Now we are opening it for question and answers. I did see few questions on the chat, and I think most of them have been replied so far. But if any okay, yeah. Yes, I do see. So I'll be starting from the last one. Yeah, post-incident, is there any industrial hygiene monitoring program, health surveillance program at the company boundary? Anybody would like to respond on that? Shashank, Shrenik?
Okay, I will go with this. So, what we believe is there has to be a kind of direct reading instrument placed nearby the styrene storage tank. So, when the leak happens, it can give a kind of alarm. So, industrial hygiene monitoring in terms of direct reading instrumentation has to be in place. And I'm sure company would have been considering at this point in time. Health surveillance will be for the people who are working inside of an industry, and then few nearby depending on the QRA that they have done. However, we cannot confirm that they should be doing the particular health surveillance for the nearby, but I'm sure for those people and employees working inside, health surveillance program must be in place, and IH monitoring program in terms of direct reading to identify any leakage will be implemented as a part of corrective actions. That's what we believe. I hope that helps you, Safira.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Shrenik.
Yeah, just to pick from where Shrenik has, concluded, I would say government authorities have started to monitor the health of people who have been exposed, and also the community has been moved out to a safe area. Regarding the point, what I understand is Safira is trying to ask that whether there should be some monitoring at the company boundary. So there are, I would say, some enforcement bodies, which local enforcement bodies, we do press very hard for having the peripheral monitoring devices. But all said and done, we have to remember that these are the mitigative measures. I mean, imagine that you get an alarm on the peripheral, the perimeter of your space where you are working. And do you think you will get enough time to respond? I mean, by the time you respond, the vapor cloud has already passed the boundaries. So, what I'm not a very big fan of mitigative measures. I would say there are certain things that. Sorry, there's some noise coming from the background. Can everyone else mute other than me? Mr. A. Lakshmanan, can you mute yourself? So what I was saying, the point that I'm trying to drive is a lot of organizations and a lot of process safety professionals, including me, at times we are very much, driven by the fact that what will we do post mitigation measures once release happens. But if we can be more focused on the preventive part, and those preventive parts based on strong reactive chemistry studies, like was mentioned by Mr. Jitendra Kumar, and what is the standard industry practice, that would be much better.
Okay, thanks, Shashank. There's another question which is coming up in relation to the layers of protection which you spoke about. So would you mind just explaining that a bit more? What's the importance of each layer and the timing of the protection?
So the question is, good quality LUPA document should be equipped based on good HAZOP and hazard. I absolutely agree. And in fact, the qualitative studies are just the starting points. But my personal experience has been these are very qualitative studies, and they're very subjective in their approach. I mean, some person who may not be very experienced in handling styrene, if he's doing a HAZOP or hazard of styrene, he may underplay the risk which may be involved. At the same time, if we are using some quantitative or semi-quantitative techniques, it helps a lot. And at that point, I would like to say that there are tools available in the open domain which you can use. Like one of the tools which has been developed and is very, very, it is strongly equipped with all the details and information that you can gather is RAST and Chef from AICHE. So I would really suggest that in your areas, in your domains, rather than basing rather than investing in barriers based on some qualitative study, better to have a quantitative or a semi-quantitative judgment, and to have a sequential layers of protection identified through those studies rather than some quantitative study. So I hope I was able to answer that question. That yes, I would say yes, LOPAs are good, provided they are being done by a very experienced person and who understands the right intent.
In fact, I would like to add here, when we talk about LOPA, so what again, as just clarified, that it is focused a lot more on the mitigation side. What we really miss out is the actual hazard identification. So the first thing that we talk about, starting from hazard and HAZOP, even to do a proper HAZOP, I really need to understand the process chemistry, and that's what is completely missed out most of the time. So if I don't even understand what is the kind of temperature I can see from a particular reaction, I cannot decide on what kind of set point I can have, which is going to make a suitable safeguard for me, which I can take as an adequate safeguard as part of the HAZOP study. When we talk about, for example, say vent, recently another incident happened at Vizag last year. I investigated that. Exactly the same thing, polymerization started, and vents, I think I was told it is done and it is adequately sized also. When we got into the details, the vent was designed for external fire case only, and the team didn't understand that there is a possibility of a polymerization leading to high pressure, and the tank got blasted off just because there was excess pressure. So these are the kind of things which we completely miss out. Even though we have a full-fledged LOPA document, it may not be adequate. So that's what we have to really see in detail. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Jatinder. I guess there are some questions related to policy or law. I guess there are certain amendments which might happen based on a series of incidents which have happened in the country. But definitely, as of now, there are policies and laws which can be utilized for managing this, but sometimes it's the neglect which is taken on by the respective sites. So yes, these are wake-up calls and lessons learned for the respective industry as well, because it will now be difficult for them to come back and restart. Okay. Yep. So I think we've had some good questions. We have got some more information to be shared by Sushant. So if you have any further questions on this specific topic, you can send it to us and we'll be happy to respond even post the session. So over to you, Sushant, for some more knowledge sharing.
So are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, Sushant.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like mentioned by everyone, I also had some of the learnings that I drew from the contributing factors. And I'd like to, it may sound a bit repetition or reiteration of what has been already mentioned, but I'll just quickly go through them. So I thought one learning is there was there's some noise from the background. Hello.
Yeah. Lakshman,
May
if
I
you mind being on
request?
mute, there's some background noise coming from your end.
Moderator will be able to mute the line.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing which I could understand is there was a lack of thorough understanding of hazards of chemicals, and there was the PHA program could have been more effective, like what Jitendra Kumar said, and what is the normal practice. You should first have a screening or a reactive chemical management system to understand what are the properties of chemicals you're handling. Ensuring the barriers are healthy and in place, like he mentioned earlier when he investigated an incident. The barrier was there, but it was not exactly effective because it was not sized for the right relief scenarios. Availability of procedures, be it operating procedures, emergency procedures, monitoring procedures, and the proper usage. The MOC for all the changes done in the process. So when we are restarting a plant after a long time, that also requires some review, and it has to be screened properly. Pre-startup safety review, and finally, you can always have a drill or a mock drill with emergency plan. Few of the discussion points which I would, like to give away to all the participants to go and have a discussion with their potential asset-facing people who are handling chemicals. Is you can ask them. The first thing you should ask them is, do they know about the reactive chemicals in their place? Are they aware of the reactivity of the chemicals being handled in the area? Are they aware of the hazards and the reactivity risks involved? So every material has its own hazard, and some chemicals may have very specific hazards which may require a very stringent and aggressive screening mechanism to be employed. So whether we have done that and whether we are aware of not, are the people or the asset-facing crew handling those plants and those chemicals aware of the risks involved? So once you have the data about the material hazards, you should collate them in a very systematic way, and it should be disseminated to all the asset-facing people. Are there effective and adequate barriers to manage the worst credible risk? So all your barriers should be based on the worst credible risk scenarios, and the operating crew should be sensitized about the barriers in place and how they are acting in avoiding the top event or major accident event. And also they should be understanding the importance of barriers. Are there verification and assurance mechanisms in place to check whether the desired barrier healthiness is being maintained? So all said and done, there can still be lacunae in the deliverance of process safety requirements, and to avoid this, there should be an independent verification and assurance mechanism, and this will ensure that the process safety intent is being served and the sanctity of the systems is being maintained. And last but not the least, are there emergency procedures or emergency preparedness plans in place based on the worst credible risk scenarios? Are all the resources needed to handle the emergency available in adequate quantity and necessary quality? And whether the people who are doing the activities in the plant are competent for carrying them out. Here I would like to bring in some of the technical aspects about reactive chemicals and how they are overlooked or not understood by people at large. So few important terms we should understand or we should try to go and find out about when we're handling or dealing with reactive chemicals are self-accelerating decomposition temperature, temperature of no return, the maximum reaction temperature and pressure, incompatibility or compatibility studies, or what we call as chemical interaction matrix, and induction time. So I'll quickly go through one by one, quickly go through them one by one and try to explain what they mean and what is the intent of knowing them. So first is self-accelerating decomposition temperature. So it is nothing but the lowest ambient. It is the lowest ambient temperature at which runaway decomposition is observed within 7 days. So there is a specific test which is carried out wherein a material is stored in a container and the temperature rise is observed over a period. And with that, the information which is gathered helps in identifying the temperatures and the conditions to be maintained when you're transporting a chemical from one area to other area, or when you're storing the chemicals. So it basically is useful in storing and transportation of styrene chemical and in general the reactive chemicals. In term to understand is temperature of no return. So temperature of no return is a key parameter for understanding and managing the reactivity hazard, especially for processing reactive chemicals and where there are chances of exothermicity in the batch reaction. And the key is that if you maintain the normal operating temperature below the temperature at which the reaction heat gain exceeds the heat loss to the surrounding. So basically, what is runaway? So runaway is when your energy released is much more or larger than the amount of energy absorbed or dissipated by the system. The runaway happens and the energy starts to accumulate. So if you maintain the temperature below that point of no return, you can have a control over the reaction. But once the temperature of no return is surpassed, even with your mitigative actions, it becomes very difficult to bring it back. So to have more clarity, this is the graph. So if you look at the red line and the green line, so green line is basically the heat being lost to the surroundings. So there is a point when the green line rises above the red line. Red line is basically the heat gain from the reaction, and it is based on the kinetic model. So when your heat is getting evolved from the system, there is a point at which if you are not removing the heat or you are not managing the heat properly, it can go beyond that point, and then it is difficult to bring it back in the control regime. And that point is known as temperature of no return. So the point where the green line and red line intersecting and it is going above green line, the red one, is known as the temperature of no return. And these are being, there are tests like ARC, which gives such output. So ARC is basically accelerating rate calorimetry. It was probably devised by Dow Chemicals with the Michigan Institute of Technology and Michigan University, if I'm not wrong. And there were professors and eminent industrial people who were involved in developing the methodology. Another important term is chemical to chemical interaction matrix. So basically every chemical has its own stability characteristic when it comes in contact with other chemical. So chemical interaction matrix are nothing but compatibility charts which are commonly used to summarize the potential hazards of mixing one chemical with other chemical. And this is information. This information is useful if available beforehand in designing your operations and site layouts. And this is how a chemical interaction matrix looks like. So there are some chemicals on x-axis and some on y-axis, and there are certain blocks which show green, red, and yellow. So green probably indicates it is okay if you mix those chemicals or they come in contact with each other. Red probably indicates complete incompatibility, and yellow shows some mechanisms which may not be acceptable, some undesirable reactions. And these type of studies in today's engineering world, there are softwares available for like CRW. So CRW is another software available from AICHE, and it is very much extensively used by process safety engineers across the globe for understanding the compatibility issues. Next is the maximum temperature and pressure of reaction. So this is the maximum adiabatic reaction temperature and pressure which may be seen for a batch system. And the intent of understanding this is it helps you in designing and defining your relief system criteria. So when you know what is the maximum temperature and pressure that you're going to encounter, you know for what the relief system should be designed. Finally, there is a term called induction time. So if you look at the graph shown on the top left, there is time elapsed before the material reaches temperature of no return. So induction time is nothing but, I can say that in absence of anything to prevent a reaction, a chemical it may begin with components, and the necessary energy of activation is present in the reaction system. So like I said, there is a free radical mechanism, and if there is a temperature or a catalytic component available, the reaction can start. And this can be prevented by adding an inhibitor, and this will prevent the onset of the reaction. So this delay in the onset of reaction caused by addition of inhibitor, that time lapse is known as the induction time. So these are few important terms that I would like you to really understand and try to identify whether you have these pieces of information in your workplace area. Uh, if you are dealing with reactive chemicals, and whether you have really tried to understand how you can utilize them. These are few of the techniques being used for screening the reactive characteristics for reactive chemicals. So differential scanning calorimetry, accelerating rate calorimetry, relief system screening tool, vent size packaging, differential thermal analysis. These are different techniques which help you to understand the chemical characteristics of reactive chemicals and the reactive part of them. And lot of publication and lot of documentation is available on the internet. You can access them and really try to understand which technique will help you understand the reactive chemicals in your area. And some of the references that you can refer to is NFPA 49, though it is not available now. But if you get an older version, it's very nice document. NFPA 49 was hazardous chemical data. It has been, there are 3-4 standards which have been merged into Handbook of Fire Protection Engineering. NFPA 49 is one of those standards. So it doesn't exist as a standalone standard now, but you can find an older version. There are certain books published by CCPS, that is Center for Chemical Process Safety, America. Essential practices for managing chemical reactivity hazards, guideline for safe storage and handling of reactive material, guideline for chemical reactivity and process safety design. So these are very nice reference books that you can refer to. There is also Breathick's handbook. So Breathick was a chemist who did a lot of work on reactive chemicals, and he has published a handbook of reactive chemicals and chemicals in general, which is very good reference material. And finally, we also have a nice book to start with, is Chemical Process Safety by Daniel Crowell and Joseph Luer, 3rd edition. That's it from my side, and I hope I was able to help you out with the information that can really help you understand the reactive chemicals in your area.
In fact, one thing I would like to add, Sushant, on this, you talked about the self-accelerating decomposition temperature. Since we are not aware of this particular property of a lot of chemicals around us, just wanted to highlight. Say, for example, if I take example of milk powder itself, we use it everywhere. So if we store milk in silo, big silo, we can decompose it.
Jitendra, your voice is not coming through properly. If you could come clearer to the microphone.
There is some disturbance from somewhere else. Yeah. So what I was saying that if milk powder is stored in a silo, it can start decomposing itself at 90 degrees only. Sugar is another example. So there are basically a lot of chemicals for which the general awareness is actually missing right now, because we have not seen too many incidents in the recent past. But these are the things that can make a lot of difference if we can start understanding the hazards of the chemical, as Sushant mentioned earlier, and taking adequate actions more towards the prevention, and then looking at the mitigation also. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to add that what Jitendra Kumar said is absolutely correct. And in fact, CSP, the Chemical Safety Board, the lead investigating agency of America, did a study in 2001 or 2, if I'm not wrong, and they did a study of almost 167 incidents of reactive runaway sort of nature, and they have come out with really mind-boggling facts. Like, I'll just spell out a few of them for you. So when they did the study, they found that nearly 50 of the 167 incidents that they studied, these incidents were from 1980 to 2001. So out of these 167 incidents, 48 incidents resulted in 108 fatalities. And nearly 50 of the 167 incidents had affected the public. And over 50% of the 167 incidents involved chemicals which were not covered by the OSHA and EPA safety regulations at that time. So there was a real lack of understanding even by the regulatory bodies is what CSB identified. So I fully agree with Mr. Jitendra Kumar's point that a lot of lack of understanding exists even amongst the regulatory bodies and industry at large. And it needs to be, those gaps need to be filled in by raising our awareness level by, starting to really understand those characteristics and properties of reactive chemicals. That's it from my side.
Okay. Thanks, Shashank, Jitendra, for pitching in. I guess we are almost towards the end of the session. There are a few questions which are coming in. We'll take them up and respond back. Mila, I guess it was the styrene gas which was released, which caused the issue. But for other questions which are there, which we have not been able to answer, we'll get back to you guys. So that's all for now from our end. Mila, any final comments from your end before we close the session?
Yeah, I think I would like to say thank you very much for sharing your experience regarding the incident. It's very important for us in terms of anticipation. So hopefully in Indonesia, we can learn from that accident, and then we can actually strengthening the protection in our facilities. So Priyanka, thank you so much for organizing this sharing session.
Yeah, thanks, Mila, and I would like to thank all the panelists, speakers to participate at short notices and sharing very good information to all of us. So thank you all, and we look to partner with you in future as well. Thank you very much. Have a safe day ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I
Bye.
really look
Bye.
forward to such.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the presentation.
Bye. Thank you Bapak Ibu yang sudah bergabung. Semoga sesi ini memberikan manfaat untuk kita semua.